My name is Lachlan Mykura and I'm transgender. I've known I was transgender since I was about 14, but I didn't really have the words to express it until much later. I seriously began to consider my medical transition when I was around 18, and I think before that I was just kind of hoping that it would go away. And obviously when I first started considering medical transition, I didn't really know where to start. I remember asking my GP about it and she kind of said, well, I don't know either. And I think that's very representative of the gender care system. You know, it was my first introduction to it and it kind of kept going from there. There are currently over 10,000 people waiting for a first appointment with NHS gender identity clinics, and waiting times can be as long as 6 years. Although I understand the NHS is under a lot of pressure, these waiting lists cause trans people a lot of distress and dysphoria. As a result, trans people are forced to turn to riskier alternatives, such as self-medication. So the hormone that I needed to transition as a trans man was testosterone, which is colloquially known as T. In the UK, T is a Class C controlled substance under the Misuse of Drugs Act 1971 and can generally only be prescribed by gender specialists. There are currently 7 gender identity clinics on the NHS in the UK where trans people can receive gender-affirming care. So when I went to university, I was finally referred to the Laurels GIC in Exeter. I think at the time, the waiting list was around 3 years. All this time, of course, you know, I was still going through female puberty, which was still giving me a lot of gender dysphoria and distress. So a couple of years pass and I hear nothing back from the Laurels. And I think at this point, I was really starting to get impatient. One day I'm sitting with my friend, another trans man, and I'm lamenting about, oh, you know, I can't get T, it's so impossible to transition on the NHS. And he turns to me and he says, oh, you know, I'm on a testosterone prescription, you can have my spare. And at this point, I'm pretty stunned, to be honest. You know, I've been waiting all this time and now it's been sort of dropped into my lap, essentially. So of course I say yes. Just like that, I'm on testosterone. So that was my journey. And at the start, I thought that that was quite unconventional, really. But the more I kind of thought about it, I thought, you know, why did I have to do this? What's not working in the system? So applying T-gel is pretty easy. It's basically just like applying lotion. Yeah, so these bottles are designed to like dispense the same amount with each pump. So you just kind of go like that. Nice, yeah, and you're not allowed to touch anything else before it dries, otherwise you'll trans their gender too. Although my experience on T has been positive for both my physical and mental health, I consider myself very lucky. There are a number of risks associated with taking testosterone, even when properly monitored by a doctor, such as high blood pressure, type 2 diabetes, and infertility. I talked to Archie, a non-binary trans person from Devon who was on T for 1.5 years.
I got mine privately with a service called Gender GP. It felt quite hard to access advice about it, and most of the advice and the medical knowledge I received was online, partly because my GP isn't very aware of trans issues and didn't really have much of an interest. There were pros and cons. The fact that she didn't care and she didn't know a lot meant that I got my prescriptions for that much cheaper because they were then on the NHS. But I didn't have that point of contact really, and with Gender GP you don't directly speak to the doctor much. It's kind of speaking to the counsellor, signing the forms, and then the doctors sign you off. Before I went on hormones, I identified as a binary trans man, and during the process of just kind of being on hormones and learning to be myself and accepting myself, I realised that I'm non-binary. And so the first year of testosterone was fantastic. And then about just over 1 year, I started gaining some weight and my muscle and fat distribution changed a lot. And then I started to get exactly the same dysphoria as I got when I wasn't on hormones. After a lot of back and forth, I decided to come off testosterone just to see if that would help with the dysphoria, and it did. And I'm really glad that I did go on testosterone, because it means things like my voice has changed, which is permanent, and like the hair on my body and that sort of thing. I get called she a lot, and it bothers me every time. It makes me feel like shit, but it's not something that sticks with me so much anymore, because it's something I've kind of just learned to accept. But I also think the public knowledge is getting there as well. Basically, I've been really lucky where I'm happy with the changes that stuck, and the changes that went, I'm also fine with them going.
Were you ever on like the NHS waiting list?
Yep, I still am. I've been on the waiting list for 3 or 4 years. I'm in NHS counselling. I'm not allowed to really talk about trans stuff because they're not qualified to deal with it. I've had people directly tell me, like, I can see you if you talk about these things, but not about these things. If you're a trans person and you need counselling, you can't then go on a 2 to 8 year waiting list just to get some counselling. That's just, it doesn't make sense. I had to tell a 9-year-old that he wouldn't get testosterone or puberty blockers until he was 18 years old. That was fucking hard. And he's fully aware of his transness, and his parents are fully supportive, and he's gonna have to sit through 7 years of puberty in the wrong body. That's just not fair. Yeah, that was heartbreaking.
Of course, testosterone isn't the be-all and end-all of transition. For trans men, top surgery is another common step in transitioning. The waiting list for top surgery on the NHS is even longer, and going private is the most common method for trans people in the UK. I talked to Toby, a trans man who has had top surgery, but is taking hormones without prescription since he is still waiting for an appointment on the NHS.
I got top surgery on the 20th of October, 2021. I don't know why I forgot that one. I wanted top surgery because my chest gave me the most dysphoria out of anything. And I wanted to go on testosterone first, but it was just impossible with finance, and I knew that if I spent the money that I was going to spend on surgery on hormones, then it wouldn't really subside my dysphoria that much. So yeah, went with surgery first. I kind of had a bit of wiggle room because I got a referral from Gender GP, and I think there's only 3 surgeons that accept Gender GP referrals. So with that one, I had to then get a letter from my therapist and send over everything from my previous GIC. And then it kind of all just went through, and it was really quick.
So how long have you been waiting for hormones or your first appointment on the NHS?
I've been with GIDS since I was 16, and I got referred at 13. I didn't get any hormones with them, and I've been fast-tracked to Charing Cross, which is another 2 years wait. So that's like, 5-6 years? Yeah. My GP won't accept any responsibility for monitoring my hormones. I have no idea why, because I've sent them so many letters and so many resources, and told them that when I do get prescribed hormones, they'll have exactly the same responsibilities. But yeah, no hope. I just get letters back saying no. I was incredibly suicidal for a really long time because I had no end in sight with transitioning. It kind of feels like a random stroke of luck that I managed to get surgery. But even though I've managed to have it, it's still impacted my mental health massively because, no one prepares you for how big that is. It's spoken about quite a bit on how, you're never too certain to make the decision. But it took a massive toll. Still does. Always has.
Getting top surgery privately is often prohibitively expensive, and although many people consider it the quicker route, even these waiting lists are beginning to increase. So I've just had an email through about my top surgery consultation. I've been waiting for this for months, and they have just cancelled it an hour beforehand. I'll just have to reschedule, but it could very well take months, to be honest. Guess I'll just have to wait. Many NHS workers feel that the system is slow to respond, and a lack of funding has made it much harder for specialist services to keep up. I talked to former district nurse Jane Torb, who worked for the NHS for 30 years.
I knew about trans people, I think, from Jan Morris. I knew about Jan Morris, the writer. That was probably the only person that I had ever heard of. But because I knew about her, it seemed something that happened, but I had never come across anyone that, no one was out to me as a patient within the NHS or in my own life, I would say, until between 1995 and 2000. It was an old man who had, it was a couple, and he was the patient, and he was dying. And then the nurse who was in charge, who saw him, came back one day and she said that he'd, as it were, come out to her. He'd always identified as a woman to himself. He thought he was the only one, ever, you know. Right. And he wanted to tell someone before he died. I don't think I met anybody who was a trans man until I started meeting people in the last maybe 5 years.
Jane believes trans issues are so new to the NHS, it is struggling to respond. But there has also been some internal resistance to treating trans people.
I don't think I would say there was a protocol as such. Inertia might be the nice word for it. I think there was a resistance. There were certain people who it was their value system that they were holding on to.
So what's happening today?
Today is finally my top surgery referral. We're getting there. So this isn't a consultation or anything, this is just a referral to the surgeon, which means we'll be discussing things like, you know, how does chest dysphoria affect me day to day, what other things I've done like binding and stuff, and what surgeons I've looked at. And then I go onto the waiting list for the surgeon themselves, which obviously varies depending on who you go with, but you know, my hope is I can get it done by the end of the year. It's now been 4 years since I was referred to the Laurels, and I've heard nothing back. I contacted them for a statement for this programme. Our gender service, the West of England Specialist Gender Identity Clinic, formerly known as the Laurels, has faced a number of challenges over the past few years, including a steep rise in demand, delays with surgery created by the pandemic, and difficulty in recruiting to key posts. We are currently focusing on those people who have already started their treatment with us, which is why the number of new assessments continues to be low. As part of our efforts to provide as much support as possible for people who are waiting to start their journey with us, this week we have launched a dedicated helpline. The service is free, confidential, and independent. We have also been actively recruiting to the service, and our recent appointments include a psychologist, a gender nurse specialist, and a peer support worker. I'm now 1 year and 6 months on T, and a lot has changed. My voice has dropped.
Okay, so this is my voice. 2 weeks on T. 1 month on T.
2 months on T. 3 months on T. 4 months on T. 5 months on T. 8 months on T. 1 year on testosterone. 1 year and 6 months on T. My face has changed, and I feel much more comfortable in myself. Going on T has absolutely been the right decision for me, but I know it's risky to self-medicate, and I still have many steps in my transition to go. The NHS needs to adapt. Trans people like me need support. NHS England has launched a scheme in Sussex, allowing some GPs to prescribe hormones at their discretion. This scheme hopes to reduce high rates of long-term physical and mental health problems in the transgender community, but it's a small step, and there's still a long way to go. As the UK begins to better understand trans people, hopefully these services will improve and no one will be left behind.